Thanks very much, Gemma, for setting this up, and for Carrie-Anne for agreeing to give us this introduction to social value. As I'm sure everybody knows, it's becoming a bigger part of our lives as clients expect more and more social value delivery as part of contracts. The tricky bit, of course, is that no two contracts look the same and no two sets of requirements look the same. So it's great to have Carrie-Anne here to lead us through the jungle, because it's complicated. And there's all sorts of routes that can take you away from the main focus of what social value is all about. So I'm delighted that she's been able to join us, and delighted that we've got over 20 views so far and more coming in as I speak. So without further ado, Carrie-Anne, are you happy to begin the presentation?
Yes, absolutely. I'll just let people know a little bit about me before I start. Some people who are on the call might already know me, and that would be lovely if that's the case. But I'm a social value consultant. I've been involved in social value for 15 years. I spent 10 years in private sector construction, working for Kia and Lang & Roke, and I've been consulting for 5 years. And in that 5 years in particular, I've spent time client side, in public sector, with contractors, with consultants, with supply chain, outside construction, in other sectors, working with charities and social enterprises and community interest companies around their social value as well. Anything from training on social value principles and things like that to bid support and strategy support. So I tend to meddle in most things connected to social value. And hopefully today I can share some information with you to try and demystify some of the things around the topic, and maybe put some things out there for you to think about in terms of how it should and could resonate with you. Hopefully everybody can still hear me. So I'm going to just go through a few topics today. So just going to talk a little bit about the social value journey, about some influencing policy and legislation, a little bit about the difference between sectors as well, which I think is pertinent for you guys in the types of roles that you play. Some quite detailed stuff on measurement and reporting, because that's fundamental to this topic. It can be a Marmite issue in terms of how we measure and report social value, but it's something we have to at least have a baseline understanding of. Social value in bids, which is another side of social value, which looks and feels quite different to project delivery in particular. And then kind of understanding that if this is a topic that you are particularly interested in and want to do more with in your role, then how you can kind of work alongside others and be part of a bit of a community for social value, and who to talk to keep the momentum behind your appetite for the topic. So that's what I want to cover off today. As I go through each of these agenda items, I want to give people a chance to ask questions at the end of that particular section, because I don't want you to have to wait. If I've said something in the social value journey that you want to ask something about, then I want to give you a chance to ask it there and then, rather than waiting until I've finished. So I will just pause a little bit and see whether there are any questions that have come through after I get to each the end of each section. So let's have a look at the journey. I have this piece of information that I share quite a lot with people when I'm talking about social value, and I'm not the only social value person to have a timeline. Others have them and talk about the journey that we've been on. And just to give you a little sense of comfort, I've seen a timeline that goes back around 2,000 years into mega history. So this one might feel like we've gone quite deep into history here, but it could be worse for you guys, so bear with me on it. The general kind of idea behind talking about the journey and understanding what's happened is to say this isn't new. So the ask and the requirement we have in 2021 is a is a product of all the activity, the positive and negative activity that's come before it. So, as early as, Charles Dickens' novels have we seen that people understand that the haves should be giving in some way to the have-nots, and that there is a difference in we have equality issues, and we always have. And because people started to behave a little bit better on the back of recognising the industry should do more for communities, we even had a pocket in time where people would make money from distributing the charitable funds from wealthy people to the poorer people, and even managed to make themselves some profit along the way. So we can never get rid of our capitalist parts of society and the part of the bigger picture. But if we look at the kind of more recent activity, in the 1970s, around that time, there was a growing acknowledgement that we have a triple bottom line in business, that it's about more than profit. And because that was something that started to be part of the dialogue more and more, there was a trust element that the society and the communities looking at business trusted them to acknowledge that business was about more than profit. And in having that trust ethos, it meant that there was a big divide. Some people adhered to the good behaviour of going further than profit, and some people just didn't really give two hoots about more than profit. And so trust wasn't enough. And that led us to having a situation where businesses were expected to communicate what they were actually doing in some way. So tell us, what are you specifically doing about the fact that we have a triple bottom line? And this was kind of the tell me era. It was about, can you articulate a message on this agenda? And what we discovered was, again, we have a mix. So the people that were doing the right thing would talk to other people about it. And then some people in business would just lie. So they would just say they were doing things when they weren't, or they would doctor the information. So asking people to communicate on this thing wasn't enough again. So that led us to being in a position where we expected people to produce some accounts. So, write this down. Do you feel confident enough to write this down? So it's there forever. And that was a really good step change. But we also discovered that some businesses are so bullshit that they'll just lie on paper. So it still wasn't enough to ask for people to create accounts on this and documents on this. So that's led us into the era that we're in now, which is about proving it. So that's why we are so data focused, and we're looking at what we do to actually back up the fact that we've been trusted to acknowledge this. We can talk about it, we can write it down, but can we back it up? So social value looks and feels the way it does because of that journey that we've been on, and that's why it's so heavy for anybody coming into it brand new in 2021. That's why this is such a big deal. So the other thing I wanted to just cover off in terms of the journey is, because we've been through that timeline, social value as a term is relatively new, especially in the UK. So the Social Value Act that was passed in 2012, I'll talk about that a little bit more later, but came into force at the beginning of 2013. That really harnessed this terminology that we're all using now, and that's great. It's a great consistency. So it's worth just remembering that social value term does cover economic, social and environmental elements of sustainability, and that there are still heaps of other terms that are used around this agenda, but they all have a relationship with each other. They're all related. It's just that social value seems to have got a bigger market share in terms of the terminology. So there are a few other terminologies listed on the slide there, just so if you're having dialogue or reading an article or a report, or you see a bid question that is using some different terminology, that you can be confident that it's still related to this subject matter. And then this is just a few pointers just to summarise, why is social value such a big deal? And it's for all the reasons we discussed in terms of looking at business going beyond profit. and investments doing more than just creating a physical asset. But these are the key things that are pushing and nudging this agenda. So work winning, social values anywhere between 5 and 30% of a bid question or a full tender. So you can win and lose work on the back of how you tackle social value. Staff retention, as we get younger people coming in and the millennial generation and people involved in that, it's just evidence upon evidence telling us that people like to work for nice businesses. People like to work for businesses that give back. Client perception, so you might not always have financial implications and things like that to your social value delivery, but essentially if you do this well, clients will start to like and trust you more, and you take pressure off them. And when we think about it, particularly in our sector, the work that we're doing a lot of the time ties right back to taxpayers' money, which is our money, and shouldn't we feel passionate that it does more than just make a profit for everybody, and it gives back more. So that's the social value journey, just a very, very quick snapshot. Please let me know whether anybody has any burning comments or questions on that before I move on, if you could. All fine so far, that's great, thank you. So let's have a quick look at the influencing policy, legislation and standards. Do remember that you're getting these slides after, so don't panic about what you have to remember about all these different documents and things. You can get the links and go and have a look at them yourself afterwards. So the Social Value Act, as it's known, was the Public Services and Social Value Act that came into force in January 2013. At the time, this was exciting and still is there as a very pivotal piece of activity that happened for us in social value and in the sector. Its existence was really exciting and made a big impact in what everybody responded to on social value. But in itself, as a piece of legislation, it was quite naff. It didn't have a lot of detail or specific information in it to guide people as to how to tackle the expectation that was in the piece of legislation. But I think that the expectation from social value practitioners was for something, magical, and really we have to work with what is possible to get passed through Parliament. And this was what we could get passed through Parliament through after fighting upon fighting from champions of it like Chris White and Hazel Blears and other people like that. So this lit a fire under everybody in terms of, we've got a piece of legislation now, this is real. And behaviourally, this created a massive step change. It didn't do that much in its specific guidance, but everybody just started to behave differently after this was released. And that's why social value in particular looks and feels how it does now. So there's information on it. It had several reviews. So when you go and have a look on the website, there were several kind of feedback in terms of how did it do after a year, how did it do after 2 years, so you can see the journey that it went on, and how it was received within business world. We also had in 2018 the civil society strategy that came out through DCMS, and this wasn't a social value piece in its specific intention, but it was a really, really good piece of strategy that had a direct connection to social value and talked very much about how to bring together the public and private sector and then the social sector, which you'll also hear called the third sector or the VCSE community. So this was a really good piece on how we should coexist together as different sectors, and there was obviously a social value impact to that. So that's definitely worth exploring and understanding. We also have a couple of standards to be aware of. So we have ISO 26000 and we have a new BS 8950. These don't look and feel like the ISO standards we see elsewhere. It's not like ISO 14001. It's not like those. It's more guidance driven, and it's more about aligning to the principles of what are in these standards rather than it being something you specifically adhere to. So it's great that they're there, but again, we have that vulnerability that they're slightly less specific and stringent as the other ISO standards and BS standards that we work to. But, you know, it's great that social value has a place within the standards community. And then our most recent piece of influencing documentation is our new procurement policy note. So this is huge. This was released last year. It came into force in January this year. It changes the language from just consider social value to account for it. It gives a very thorough, detailed social value model for central government to work to when they're asking about social value. And it's given a level of seriousness to this topic that we just didn't have before, especially for central government. It was ironic after the Social Value Act was released and other pieces of strategy came out that when they had a look at who was doing better in terms of applying social value, local government was doing much, much better than central government. And that was a little bit embarrassing for central government, given that that's where the legislation came from in the first place. So this is a bit of a reaction to that, as well as wanting to make sure that central government do embed social value better. But this is already changing things again, like upping the ante again in terms of what we see in our bids and what we have to deliver in projects. So worth investigating. Any questions on the policy and standards and bit of information I've just shared? I'll go to my little moderation tab again. Is social value only as good as it's monitored? I think, do you mean is social value only good if it is monitored? Yes. No. So it's not about putting people in a position where if they don't have a way to monitor and measure social value, then that's not doing any good. It's about understanding that social value has become a differentiator across the piece for clients and businesses. And if you want to have the ability to use what you do in terms of social value activities as a differentiator for your business, you have to be able to quantify what it is you've done to prove it and demonstrate its value. So it's become far more than kind of just good intentions, and that is a negative thing sometimes, but it's a reality that we're living with, especially in construction and the built environment. So it is possible to do social value just out of the goodness of your heart without kind of dwelling too much on the measurement and monitoring, but you're better to place yourself in a position where you are measuring and monitoring things. It also allows you to make good decisions about what's next for you. It allows you to analyse data and strategise your approach for social value if you've got a bit more of an approach to it like that. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question. So let's have a look at a couple of sector nuances. I'm not going to dwell too much on this, but there is a really good report that the ICE and Useful Projects put out there that was about maximising social value for infrastructure projects. Now, the reason this big research piece and report was funded and produced is because there is an understanding that social value in construction gets a lot of press, and sometimes the application of the social value principles in infrastructure look and feel differently. Infrastructure projects are longer, have a bigger geography, don't look as nice as a new hospital or a new school sometimes, because they're connected to highways and rail and other sectors, and so it can be difficult to get that level of buy-in to what the value of those projects is from a social value point of view. So I flagged this up just to say, the challenge in infrastructure is very much connected to the scale of projects, in that if we're looking at best practice that's come from a pure construction discipline, we have to understand how it's scalable for infrastructure projects. This report that's available to you goes into that detail quite well and explains and articulates that quite well. So let's have a look at another report. This is a bit blurry, but I'll give you the links to these reports so you can have a look at the specific information in them. But this is a list essentially from a more construction-based report that was called From the Ground Up, that was put together by reaching out into the construction community, looking at case studies and interrogating social value in a lot of detail. And it came to light that within construction, because of how mature social value is, that we're in a position where the challenge is actually getting more of a focused set of outcomes in projects and actually understanding what the most relevant social value is for that client and that particular project, rather than any good activity counting as social value because anything goes. We're much more mature than that now, so it's interrogated differently and the expectations are different. So the challenge with construction starts to change slightly because we've done so much social value that clients are getting picky, and so they should. It should be relevant. But I thought the interesting thing was that these two reports happened, the ICE report and the From the Ground Up report both happened at a similar time, but they looked at two different parts of our industry. But one of the things that came through, this is back to the infrastructure-based report, is the top thing that was a challenge was a lack of understanding about what social value is, which is exactly the same as the top challenge in the construction report. And this was not a kind of, no one was in cahoots with each other. This was a genuine piece of research that happened. This was a genuine piece of research that happened. So we're almost a victim of our own success of social value, in that now it's not just about anything goes, it's about making things very specific. And that's something we have to pay attention to as we go through, no matter whether you're in construction or infrastructure. So I don't know if we have any questions at this point. I saw Kevin put something up there, whether that needs answering now or whether it can wait. No, it's up there. So most local authorities try to put monetary value. Is this the best measure, or is the impact of social value measured from the quantifiable feedback of beneficiaries? So yeah, good question, as I would expect from Kevin. I think that we would all probably agree that to have beneficiary-based data on actual delivery is very, very valuable. But we would also probably have to agree that the strategy and the process and the infrastructure we would need to ensure we get non-subjective, good quality data back from all the beneficiaries that we engage with can be really, really difficult to do and really resource heavy to do. So the reason that local authorities default to using financial proxies to quantify social value is because those deal with the economic and fiscal impact of what happens, rather than the social and well-being impact on, did that human being feel better? It was, did that human being earn more money and pay more tax? And for local authorities, it's sometimes easier for them to ask and track economic and fiscal impact around tax and national insurance and less service use. You know, there's data out there to say how much does it cost for an ambulance to come to your home or for a doctor's visit, all those other things. But we have no standard proxies for do human beings feel less isolated, more confident, more sure in their career. So it is better to get beneficiary-based data, but we don't have a slick enough approach for that right now for it to be accessible to all people procuring social value, and all sizes and types of businesses that might be expected to deliver that social value. So we're on a journey with it, but I think it's still recognised as a challenge, and we can't just rest on the economic and fiscal measures that we have. We have to think about how we will do more. So hopefully that answers Kevin's question, but I'm sure he'll tell me later if it's not. He'll email me or something. Okay, so measurement and monitoring. Let's tackle this. This is the very choppy sea of information that is out there for us on measurement and monitoring. Again, we're at the mercy of the fact that we as an industry are quite mature on this topic compared to others, and we've been doing a lot of stuff on this for a while. So let's have a look what it looks like. To keep it simple, I will go a little bit more into some detail around this, but to keep it simple, we need to think about outcomes. So this is the language we need to use. And when our clients are using this language to us, what do they mean? Well, they mean what was the effect of what we did. So if we did 10 of something, what was the actual effect of it? So this little image just kind of tells you, you know, this is cups of coffee. You can measure how many cups of coffee were purchased or drank. Does it tell you whether that coffee was good? Does it tell you whether that individual would have that coffee again? It doesn't. So we need to know whether the person drinking the coffee liked it or didn't. And that's where we need to be in terms of thinking about outcomes. Another way to think about this is apprenticeships. So we know apprenticeships is a big push and drive within social value. It's asked a lot within tenders. And if we say we're going to do 10 apprentices and that's what we capture and that's it, that's all we said, we'll do 10, we did 10. They're outputs. And if we want to tell a message around what the impact of those apprenticeships, the creation of those apprenticeships was, we need to understand what the outcomes were. So when an apprentice gets an opportunity, they're employed. So they're given a contract of employment, usually, not every time, but usually, in order to complete that apprenticeship. They're on a training course because they're on an apprenticeship, but that training course could be a level 2, a 3, a 4. It could be a degree apprentice. So the detail there is really important. And that individual previously was doing something else with their life before they became this apprentice. They were either unemployed or NEET or an ex-offender or in care, or they were actually in a senior role in another sector and wanted to retrain and come into our sector and have actually taken a step down. Or they worked for one contractor and have come across to another contractor. So they've not actually really moved. They're not earning any more or less money. The apprenticeship duration is still the same because they've just transferred their learning. So, you know, that's a fairly static experience for that individual, but they're probably slightly happier if they didn't like their previous employer. So these are the outcomes. So outputs are the number of apprentices or the number of cups of coffee, and the outcome is, well, what was the effect of that? What was the actual impact? So that's just to get us thinking in that way. And this explains a little bit more about quite the level of importance that comes with that outcome level of kind of focus on what you capture and the data that you get and the communication you use, because this is a cascade. This is a flow of an approach that you use to understanding what the impact and value is of your intervention. And if you stop at output, you can't get to impact and value. You just literally can't get there. So the outcome approach and taking that in terms of how you measure social value is a gateway to being able to say what the impact and value was, to be able to connect to the financial proxies that are available and everything else that's there for you in terms of the measurement environment. So, we might be in a position as a business where we've not got the resources to go beyond outputs, and that's okay, but we have to plan for how we will, because if we just rest on stopping at outputs, we'll never get any further along that chain. And really, to be competitive in this market, that's where you need to be looking. So that's the journey that you need to have as the goal. Some people are already there. Some people are partway along that journey. That doesn't matter. Can't do everything at once. So it's just about knowing that's the ultimate goal to get to. So yeah, I'm going to hit you with some more information on this stuff. And you get to keep this slide and rethink about this after I've taken you through it. So, but I just want to demystify some of the things you might have heard about. So we've got 4 fundamental things in the measurement market. We have data sets right at the bottom of the pile. Data sets are where these financial proxies are. So recruiting an ex-offender is worth this much money. Training someone on a level 4 qualification is worth this much money. That information is in data sets, and data sets were created quite a while ago and they've been around for a long time, but they are repositories of data. They're clunky, they're not that user friendly, and we don't really have to worry about them anymore, because what we do have on top of that are data frameworks. So frameworks tend to be spreadsheet based tools, like interactive spreadsheets that allow you to access those data sets in a more controlled way. So that means we don't have to worry about finding whether we've chosen the right proxy number and things like that. It's pre-populated, it's simpler to use. Examples of a data framework is the National TOMS. Hopefully some people will have heard of that, and that will make that a bit clearer. We have methodologies that sit then around that. Methodologies are things like social return on investment, cost benefit analysis. The methodologies in this environment are there to make sure that we don't take the mick with how much we're claiming. And we think about what would have happened anyway. We think about, was that person feeling better that day just because we gave them a job? Or is it because they got a new puppy in the family, or something else happened, some other impact and influence kind of happened on that person? So it's about making sure that we don't think that everything that we've done is 100% the reason why people feel better. Methodologies are there to do that and just to check us a little bit in terms of what we're claiming. Now, a lot of the frameworks available to us in a really positive light have methodologies embedded in them. They've already thought about that stuff. They've already used the principles of methodologies to build that framework. And that's great, because that means we can trust them, we can use them, and we don't have to worry about that best practice. The good news is that data sets, frameworks, and methodologies tend to be free or very low cost. So all of that environment is available to us to look at how we measure and quantify our social value. But the only thing that's really going to need an investment decision is a system. So a system is a software-based system that encompasses the data set, the framework, and the methodology into a one-stop shop, easy to use, simple interface, cloud-based, connected to apps, all that kind of stuff that just makes measurement life easier. And because they do all that, they're quite expensive, and it requires a significant investment decision to know which one of those is right for you, if any. So our data and measurement environment is complex. This is what it looks like. And you can't just go feet first into the measurement world without understanding how these different things work together and what it is you're actually looking to do. So hopefully that gives you some resource there to go back and think about. Someone's asked me if there's a platform I would recommend. I can just see that popped up. The short answer is no, there isn't, because I remain quite neutral as a consultant. And the reason for that is that you have to create a brief for what you want. That brief can be 3 lines of text or 3 pages of text. But before you know which tool to go to in the market, you have to know what it is you're trying to achieve from your measurement approach. And once you've got that, then that will narrow the market for you and point you in the direction of a particular tool or approach. But you can't just, there isn't one tool that is the best at the top of the tree. There one system, I should say, if I'm using my own terminology there. So they all do quite different things, and they're all quite nuanced in their own way. So we have to know what you want from your measurement approach before we know which tool you should use or which system you should use. So, a couple of bits of information that I wanted you to have on the slides. I'm not going to wax lyrical about this for you in the session, because you can read, you can go back and have a look. But we've got some trends in the UK. So TOMS has a major following. Lots of public sector clients use it. It's quite construction leaning in terms of within our industry. More kind of pure construction type clients and projects will easily be able to use TOMS. We have a bit of infrastructure nuance. So Network Rail actually have the Common Social Impact Framework that they developed with Symmetrica Jacobs, and use impact reporting to capture data for. Symmetrica and impact reporting are both systems, just to refer back to the other slide, but systems come with knowledgeable teams and people who help to develop strategies and approaches for other organisations as well. So that's kind of how that was created. And then I mentioned that we have the new social value model, and what comes with that is a new TOMS plugin. So there's a central government TOMS plugin that's coming, which will give us a specific set of measures that is just applicable to measuring the things within the new social value model. It still relates over to our existing TOMS that we have, it just recontextualizes them for us. So that's going to be something that's quite actively used. And I've just left you with a couple of bits on international and global trends that we might see and you might want to know about if your remit goes further than just here. So it's about the Sustainable Development Goals, which also are relevant to us here as well. ESG reporting, there's trends for that. And we've got the Social Value Bank in Australia, as well as here in the UK. So there are certain trends and things to be aware of in terms of what's happening with measurement. So that's just to give you a flavour for some of the things that are happening. I think we've had a few questions, so I wonder whether I need to answer some of these, and if I do, they will come up on the screen. Are the best outcomes those that benefit the business as well as the beneficiaries? Well, you should really try to be in a position where you can differentiate your corporate approach and what you're doing in reaction to what your clients want and need. So we find a lot of the time that an organisation will have a social value or social sustainability or CSR approach that they come across several barriers when they're trying to then tell a client how that's going to benefit that client in a bid, because that program of work has been generated out of what the business wants to do. So that barrier that's caused when they're trying to put that into a work winning context can have a negative effect, because it means the business can change what they then choose to do because it didn't fit for work winning. And that's a real shame, because businesses should still feel empowered to do social value and socially responsible activity that resonates with their values, not just as a reaction to what clients want. So it's about having yourself as an organisation have a suite of activity that you do that you feel passionate about, but that you know you've tested to be able to make it contextualised for your clients as well. So you have to try and come to a compromise position without overriding your corporate approach with what your clients want. So it is about a bit of a journey in that case. And there's not a lot of initiatives and activities that can absolutely demonstrate benefit for a business and beneficiaries. Like, that can be really difficult to do, and it can require weeks of conversation to do. So it's better to try to create a bit of a balance and have activity that you do corporately that you know can resonate with clients, and also have client focused activity that is benefiting the beneficiaries that they're interested in you benefiting as well. That's probably not what we want to hear, because we probably want something that's an easier win than that, but in my experience, that's not easy to do. So the frameworks conflict. So claims to measure the same activity, different outcome value. Yes, so the frameworks conflict and the systems also conflict. And this is because they have nuanced applications of the methodologies that I talked about, in that they'll have made a decision that the approach that they take reduces the number that they claim by X%, and another one will have chosen a different percentage, so the number will look and feel slightly different. For that reason, it is difficult to mix and match across frameworks, and it causes us a challenge. But we have to understand that some clients have chosen the framework that they've chosen, and if it's in a procurement context, the playing field is level, because everybody bidding is using the same framework. So just because in-house you might use a different framework that would have got you a bigger number, doesn't mean that the client is wrong in choosing the framework that they've chosen, as long as they let you use the same one or insist that you use the same one. And this is why you have to create a brief. If this is a decision you're trying to make as a business, what do we do? How do we measure our social value? Then you have to make that decision based on what your business is trying to achieve. But we have a very real situation in the industry where you make a corporate decision and you have a standard way of reporting, and it will never meet every client's need for reporting in the future, because it's very fragmented, and you have to come up with a strategy to navigate that. There is no solution to the fact that the frameworks have different values within them right now, and we just have to be able to have dialogue and conversation around the subject to make sure that we understand what our offer is and what our decisions are that we're making at a corporate level. So this is probably along the similar kind of similar theme. So they interpret data sets in strange ways. It's about how they apply the methodology. So there are a suite of impact metrics: attribution, displacement, substitution, all these other things that are about not overclaiming, and there isn't a set method for which percentage you apply where. So the different frameworks will have applied those impact metrics in different ways to justify their model and the way they do it, and their product that they've created. So it will look strange, but if you have questions about it, you should be able to ask Social Value Portal. or the National Social Value Task Force or the hack team about that if you've got questions around how they've arrived at a number, because they should be able to explain that to you and tell you why. Okay, so we're back to social value in bids. So let's have a quick overview of this this kind of like parallel universe of social value. Social value in bidding looks and feels very different to what it does in delivery, and it's really challenging right now. The weighting is going up, the questions are becoming more obscure all the time, and it requires a specific skill set and focus to handle this, and it's about realising the reality of that. So I've just given a few kind of observations. We have different kinds of questions and they all give us a different challenge. So we have a short and sweet type of question, which says something along the lines of, what value or benefit are you going to deliver on this project? And immediately you think, well, that's quite simple, but there's no context or guidance with that. There's no structure other than social, economic and environmental. So it's so open-ended that how can you be sure that you've picked the right things to say because of the lack of structure? So it seems quite nice at the outset that you've got something that gives you some artistic license around what you want to put into that answer, but it also makes you really nervous of whether you've picked the right content. We've also got the epic question. So anybody that's responded to anything through Star Procure will see that we have an outcome-based offer of numbers, plus a method statement that's broken down into 4 sections. And this is a killer. Like, it's just easy to be losing the will to live answering something like this, because the amount of detail you have to go into and the amount of concentration on making sure your answer is compliant with all the specific criteria, this has kind of gone too far the other way. So, you know, that needs a lot of resource and a lot of consideration when it's quite possible to put an answer together, as we all do, but it's a big challenge, a question like that. We sometimes get the repeat, as I call it, where you've got 2 questions that look and feel very similar in the social value section. Usually mix the terms social value, added value, social innovation, and sometimes it's not clear. Never ever guess at what you think it means if it's strange and repetitive and ambiguous, because if you guess wrong, you will not score well. And if it's worth 20%, you could lose the bid because you've assumed something wrong. So always TQ if it looks strange or repetitive. And then we have the obscure question that refers us to section 5 of the specification 3 of annex 4 of such and such a document. And you're so busy making sure that you're compliant with every specification requirement that's needed that you never really get to tell the client what it is that you're going to do. So that needs a lot of resource and focus and consideration when you put in an answer together. So these are the types of questions we get, and that's why social value in bidding is a parallel universe, because as you can see, this isn't what we would naturally want to tell the client, it's what we have to tell the client because of the procurement parameters that we're working in. We also then have to think about what it's like to be on the other side. So what is the client getting back? Some of us are better at writing than others, and that's okay, that's normal. And some responses that we get back from a scoring point of view are really easy to understand and absorb, and it's like reading a classic, Pride and Prejudice. It's a joy to receive and read and be part of. It's great. We also have responses where we know the bidder knows what they're talking about and they're passionate about the subject matter, but they've spent a lot of time telling us that rather than answering the question. So that can be frustrating because We know they know what they're saying, but they've not paid enough attention to the type of question they've been asked. And then we get something that is so hard to understand what the bidder is trying to tell you that you almost need an interpretation of it. It's just really obscure and choppy, and is usually where they're trying to retrofit their corporate approach into the question without trying to recalibrate what they can put on the page. So this diverse type of response leads to people scoring differently, regardless of how much they actually had in place to answer the question well. We also have different types of scorers. So let's think about the fact that we have happy scorer. Happy scorer wants you to score 9 or 10 out of 10. They want you to have nailed this answer. They want to see the structures right and to just give you the benefit of doubt wherever possible. And the better you do, the happier they are. And that's great if that's who you get. The doc type scorer is a subject matter expert. So if you have written something that is utter rubbish and completely fabricated and tenuous and woolly and full of filler words and endeavour words and things like that, then this person is going to see that a mile off, and that is going to affect how they view your response. That can be quite challenging, so you need to know who is scoring your answer if you can. And then we have grumpy, and grumpy doesn't want you to score well and wants you to trip up, and would rather someone have not scored an 8, a 9 or a 10 out of 10, and they'll go home happy if that's not happened. So let's always remember that there is a level of subjectivity, and these are the type of scorers that we can get. I'm just going to quickly breeze over this because I've noticed the time, but you get these slides, so you'll be able to have a look at this. This is about the infrastructure needed to deliver social value. It was a bit of a nice to have in my presentation, so people can come back to me and ask me some questions about this after, because you'll get my contact details. The social value club. So we have different types of people in our businesses. We have someone who is really into social value, sparkly unicorn, loves social value. I'm one of those people. There are other people like me as well. There is a type of person who would rather not volunteer and do stuff, and that's okay. You don't have to want to do this stuff, but we have to know that they're there in our businesses when we're trying to make offers for social value. And we also have a type 3 person who thinks that social value seems to be a bit out there and a bit wacky, and they know it's a thing, but they think if they ignore it, then it might go away and they might have to deal with it. And those people are quite nice to connect to and deal with, because they have the potential to become a sparkly unicorn, which is lovely. But we have to understand the level of buy-in and who is going to come into the club of social value and who absolutely doesn't want to be a member of the social value club. This is just a little bit of a thing to say, if you've ever segregated rubbish, had a low emission car, turned off the tap when you're brushing your teeth, worn a poppy, taken reusable bags to the supermarket, all this stuff is social value related stuff. And if you've ever done any of those things, then you potentially can be in the club and be part of the conversation of social value and engage with people and be part of the dialogue. So don't think just because you don't know a lot about social value or that you don't have a lot of experience that you're not part of a community of people who are into this topic. Because if you've done any of those things, you're already part way there on your journey, and that's lovely. I have put some slides on here for further reading because you get these slides after. So that's all useful bits of documents for you to go and have a look at, and I will take any more questions in the next few minutes.
I think that's it for questions, Carrie-Anne.
Good. It was a very whistle-stop tour. A lot of information in there, and I understand that, and that's why my contact details are on there, because any questions that anybody has once they've had time to absorb the slides, they're more than welcome to just pop me an email over, or do it managed by you guys if that's how you want to do it. You can let people know how's best to do it, but there is your snapshot into what social value looks and feels like right now.
Carrie-Anne, thank you very much indeed. I think that was rather more than a snapshot, but absolutely heroic job to finish with 2 minutes to spare. That covered such a lot of ground that is so relevant to our members at the moment. So it will be an invaluable resource. Thank you very much indeed.
No problem.
So if there's no further questions, can I thank Gemma for setting this up and organising it? I'm most grateful. And to Carrie-Anne for the excellent presentation, and for all of you who are able to join us.